Hello everyone and welcome to a new Euractiv event, a dialogue on democracy, exploring participatory budgeting and citizens' participation in the EU, supported by Demotech. Particularly in time of elections, participatory democracy and budgeting are crucial topics nowadays to understand the state of play of democratic participation in our societies. To make the debate more lively, you can ask questions through Slido. You can see here on the screen the QR code or enter the code #participatory-budgeting. Before starting the discussion, I want to show you a video by Marco Venosta, project manager of the Demotech project.
Hi, my name is Marco Venosta and I work on the Demotech project for Euractiv. This event is part of the Demotech project. Demotech is funded by the Horizon 2020 program. The project started in March 2021, it ends this year, and it aims to investigate the role of participatory budgeting in fostering greater and more informed citizen participation in local policy making. Euractiv is one of 7 Demotech partners across Europe, including academia, media, and non-profits. So what is participatory budgeting? It is a form of citizen participation in which citizens are involved in the process of deciding how public money is spent. The local population is often given a role in the scrutiny and monitoring of the process that follows the allocation of budgets. Demotech involves a multidisciplinary methodological approach, applying innovative methods including experiments, computational text analysis of big data, representative surveys framing, and discourse analysis. Demotech implements this multidisciplinary approach in 7 regions across Europe. In order to produce timely policy recommendations at different government scales, the project's research efforts looked into 3 separate societal groups: citizens, civil society organizations and the media, and what influence they might have on the wider populations, and policy elites, and what innovative features of policymaking and governance they are introducing to widen and deepen citizen participation. For more information, all of Euractiv's coverage as part of the Demotech project is available on Euractiv's Participatory Democracy section. The following video will also give you a broader context on the project, its consortium partners, and its mission. Thank you for joining us today.
In most European countries, trust in democratic institutions has declined. Citizens are feeling left behind and disempowered to influence governments, which they perceive to be disconnected from their needs and more concerned with powerful interest groups. One of the European Commission's priorities is to give a new push for European democracy by giving European citizens a bigger say. The EU-funded Horizon 2020 project, Demotech, examines the role of participatory budgeting in fostering greater and more informed citizen participation in policymaking in a period of increased polarization and alienation from the political process. Demotech focuses on democratizing territorial cohesion, experimenting with deliberative citizen engagement and participatory budgeting in European regional and urban policies. Democracy, citizens' engagement, and democratic innovations are at the heart of the project. Participatory budgeting is a democratic innovation that grants citizens a direct say on how public money is spent. The project aims to explore the determinants of effective citizen engagement in participatory budgeting, analyze the discourse surrounding participatory budgeting in the public sphere as it appears in online news and social networks, investigate different participatory budgeting methods in practice through pilot experiments and real-world participatory budgeting events, draw conclusions for both theory and practice and recommendations for policy at the regional and urban levels, promote awareness of participatory budgeting among citizens and wider stakeholders. Innovative methods such as experiments, computational text analysis of big data, representative surveys, framing and discourse analysis, and case studies will be applied in 7 urban communities across Europe, such as Cyprus, Greece, Ireland, Netherlands, Poland, Romania, and Scotland. Demotech aims to provide novel theoretical and empirical findings on participatory budgeting and democratic decision-making, develop practical tools and capacity for practitioners, and produce timely policy recommendations at different government scales. Demotech consists of an interdisciplinary and well-integrated consortium of academic, media and citizen engagement partners with expertise in political science, regional and urban studies, sociology, media and communication studies, and computer science. With our partners, we place great emphasis on the co-creation of democratic innovation and production of knowledge to strengthen democratic participation and active citizenship.
And now is the time to introduce our panelists. Today we have from the European Commission Gaëtan Ricard-Nioul, Deputy Head of Unit on Citizens Dialogue, and Edward Falk, Policy Officer at the Directorate General for Budget. Then we have the member of the European Parliament Helmut Scholz from the Left Group, Carol Thomas, Policy Advisor from the Council of European Municipalities and Regions, Andras Farkas, Strategic Director at Pont Group, Elena Kalistru from the European Economic and Social Committee, and Vasilis Manavopoulos from the Cyprus University of Technology. Now, please, Gaëtan, introduce yourself to the audience.
Yes, hello everyone. So indeed, I am Gaëtan Ricard-Nioul. I work in the Commission on Citizen Engagement. I was involved in the Conference on the Future of Europe, and now I am following up actually on proposals from the Conference on the Future of Europe. And this is a very interesting moment for this event, because this week we are launching a new European Citizens panel on energy efficiency. This weekend is starting, and we also launch a new citizen engagement platform. So it's a very timely debate.
And I will ask you some questions about it later. Please, Edward, go ahead.
So my name is Edward Falk, and I work in the European Commission in the Directorate General for Budget. I can only agree with Gaëtan that the engagement of citizens and businesses and other stakeholders is an essential part of the EU decision-making process. She referred to some of the latest initiatives aimed at strengthening even more this open dialogue with citizens, and I guess that we'll have the opportunity to dig deeper on those. But just to say from my side that there are mechanisms in place so that stakeholders have the possibility to express their views on the design of EU initiatives, including the EU budget, because this is the part that concerns me the most. Specifically for the EU budget, I would like to stress maybe two things to start with. One is the fact that we run extensive stakeholder consultations to inform any of the Commission proposals, but also the MFF package, so the multi-annual financial framework, notably on the sectoral acts for each and every one of the specific programs that constitute the EU budget. And second, the fact that there are other ways to also participate in the design of the EU spending once the MFF and the relevant programs have been agreed. For instance, cohesion funds, which represent 1/3 of the EU budget, are implemented in accordance with the so-called partnership principle, which involves authorities at European, national, regional, and local level, social partners and organizations from civil society. And that partnership is an important element to prepare also the Common Agricultural Policy strategic plans. And we also have specific consultations for the annual work programs of directly managed funds, for instance, Horizon Europe, Digital Europe, Innovation Fund, which basically decide which calls for proposals will be carried out to implement the funds. So I'm looking forward to continue the discussion with you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Edward. Then now, Helmut, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, good morning, everybody, and thank you for inviting me to this very interesting and, as Gaëtan said, in-time discussion and debate. I was a rapporteur of the European Parliament for a report, initiative report on the participatory democracy in the decision-making. And I think it is very important that we understand that participatory democracy, also the participatory budgeting line, always needs that the EU institutions should be very clear about the aim, the tools, the instruments, and in particular, the follow-up process, which after the participation or during the participation of citizens in the decision-making would follow up. Because we should not disappoint citizens in the way when they are working ideas, working out proposals, etc., that then nothing is happening. And as it was already mentioned, I was also the board member in the steering committee for the Conference on the Future of Europe from the European Parliament side, we see that the follow-up process of what the recommendations worked out by the citizen has been, only partly has been implemented so far. So there is still a lack of, how to say it, passion of the EU institutions really to realize what has been done. So the European Parliament tried a lot, also by showing that there is a need of treaty change, that there is a need of calling a convention. And in this way, of course, also to further develop the idea of how we include citizens in this way, the experience we had collected during the Conference on the Future of Europe, for example, with the digital platform, which I think was a brave experience from the Commission introduced, enabling citizens cross-border from all the EU 27 member states and neighboring countries to get involved, to propose what should be the focus of the conference. And that, I should say, must be continued. And therefore, I really thank for picking up your ideas. And probably we have to come back also in the new legislative term to all these ideas collected in the years 2019, 2024. Looking forward, a very interesting debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Helmut. Please, Carol, introduce yourself.
Yes, good morning. Do you hear me?
Hear you.
Yeah, good morning. Carol Thomas from the CMR, the Council of European Municipalities and Regions. Great pleasure to be with you. CMR, we're the umbrella organisation that represents the largest number of national associations of local and regional governments from across Europe. So, of course, this whole area of citizens' participation, deliberative democracy, elevating citizens' voices, citizens' engagement, that's clearly at the heart of many of the activities that our members are keen to continue to promote. We've been very pleased to see how this whole area has gathered a real head of steam over the last years, because quite clearly it's citizens' interests, as we've seen this disengagement, disconnection with the institutional bodies, the lack of trust as well in our democratic processes. It's critical that we find ways that we can reconnect, because of course it's at the heart of democracy that we have, citizens' concerns, and that are also the basis for change. So it's excellent that we've seen that. I'm really pleased to hear that we're continuing the initiative. I was happy to hear what the European Commission was saying about the initiatives that are being followed up this week, because quite clearly participatory democracy practices that have been in place for many years in local and regional governments in different forms, whether that be in a dialogue and partnerships, citizens' assemblies, participatory democracy, participatory budgeting processes, of course, is one of the most well-known of those. But there are many different ways that local and regional governments are engaging their citizens to help address the needs of local areas, to look at how we can better provide public services, and to hear what citizens want from their local leaders. So, we can only move forward on this as a way to revive our democracy and re-engage our citizens. And I couldn't agree more with what Helmut Schulz was saying about not just the need to engage, but to seem to be actually taking that feedback and being and doing something constructive with that. Citizens need to see that what they have to say, their input, their contributions, their time and their effort is actually making a difference, and they're being heard and listened to, and that it can bring change to their localities, to their areas, and to their regions, and to their daily lives.
Thank you so much, Carol. Please, Andras, introduce yourself now.
Hello, thank you for inviting me and having me in this panel. My name is Andras. I'm coming from Cluj, Transylvania, Romania. Yes, that Transylvania. I'm working with an NGO which is called Pond Group. It is established here in Cluj, and the reason I was invited, I suppose, to this panel is because of the fact that since 2015 we are working on something which is called participatory budgeting for youth. It is called Command Cluj-Napoca. It's a way to engage young people in the life of the society, supporting them as informal groups to initiate ideas and implement ideas with funding coming from the municipality, but where the decision is not taken by the municipality about which ideas would be funded, but it is taken by people themselves. This is something where we already managed to gather 7 years of experience. I'm also happy to share that it has been extended to 2 other cities in Romania, Satu Mare and Sfântu Gheorghe. So it is something which is, I believe, growing and somehow probably answering the need of young people, of cities overall, in engaging this specific generation because of various challenges cities have, brain drain, demographic challenges, and overall the level of trust and the sense of ownership of a city by this generation. What I would like to add to this discussion is that our experience with this is that actually participatory budgeting as a mechanism, it is a very good learning tool. It is a learning tool because young people, for example, proposing ideas, they learn about how to propose ideas, how to formulate them, to identify needs and come up with some solutions for this. On the citizen side, obviously, it's about an intergenerational trust because citizens are somehow validating the ideas of young people who came forward with their ideas. Obviously, as it was already mentioned before, it is related also to the trust in various institutions, in this case, the City Hall, for example, because the City Hall is sending out the message that, yes, I'm trusting people to decide about what things could be supported or not. And I would imagine that is obviously it also has, I would say, a kind of, it's a very good practice of practicing democracy. Obviously, we are choosing our leaders, elected bodies, because we don't have time every day to work on deciding about things, resources, priorities, developments, and everything. But from time to time, we need to exercise this thing of being involved, deciding on some things, even between 2 elections. Obviously, this year is an election year, so we will have a lot of decisions around, especially here in Romania, but also other parts of Europe. But again, participatory budgeting overall, it's a very good way to understand the need to get involved from time to time, but also to understand the fact that resources are limited. And when we are taking responsible decisions as citizens, we also need to weigh in, okay, what are our priorities? What do we need to choose from? And how do we put things in balance in order for having the best decision with the available resources? So I'm also looking forward to the discussion about how this could work on local level, maybe on national level, or maybe even on European level. As I know it hasn't been yet tested at European level, participatory budgeting. It would be a nice, although complicated effort.
Thank you, Andras. Now, please, Elena.
Good morning on my behalf as well. I am today representing the European Economic and Social Committee, an organization that brings together civil society organizations like mine. I am coming from an NGO called Funky Citizens, but also trade unions and employers organizations. I am also the initiator of an own initiative opinion with regards to participatory budgeting at EU level. So we're going fully ambitious in this regard. We are trying to explore the ways in which the MFF, the multi-annual financial framework, and the EU budget could be subject not necessarily to a traditional participatory budgeting mechanism, but to some but to somehow take those tools that empower citizens in getting involved in the fiscal policies, and see whether we can find the right balance between bringing to the table the needs and the priorities of citizens, as well as the expertise of organized civil society. In this regard, I would like to say that not only this project is very, very timely, but also the fact that, of course, we would much appreciate all the findings and recommendations that are coming from such a project, but also from such discussions. I believe that it's a good moment to understand how, while talking about a complicated and apparently technical topic like the budget, we can also counteract the populist views and the populist narratives with a very well settled discussion about what we want from the common resources we have available. I'm a budget geek myself, so I understand that we will never have millions and millions of people that want to get involved in deciding how the budget should be spent. But I also know from my grassroots experience, but also from the experience of the other colleagues from the European Economic and Social Committee, that oftentimes citizens are smarter than we think, and that if things and mechanisms are explained in a transparent and open way, they can get involved, and not only that they will feel more ownership with regards to the result of the financial allocations, for example, but that they will become strong supporters of those policies to which they feel that they contributed to. So in our own initiative opinion, I hope to be able to come up with the views of the organized civil society. As a committee, we are also going full speed with regards to applying the youth test. So we believe that by the end of the drafting process for this own initiative opinion, we will also get the input from youth organizations when it comes to the way in which participatory budgeting could work at an EU level. I'm very much looking forward to this conversation, and of course I am keeping my ears open towards still as much as possible from the ideas that will be discussed here, and looking forward to also seeing what are the mechanisms in other frameworks.
Thank you so much, Elena. And now to Vasilis, who will give us a short presentation of the Demotech project. Please, Vasilis, you can also, of course, share your screen.
Thank you. So, thank you all for being here. My name is Vasilis Manavopoulos. I'm employed as a researcher in the Cyprus University of Technology. And for quite a while now, I've been working on this Demotech project, which is a research project funded through the European Union's Horizon 2020 program. Luckily, I've been spared the tedium of needing to introduce to you the project and the partners and all this, and what participatory budgeting is, just to point out two things. One, that at least as it applies to Europe, participatory budgeting usually only involves a small portion of discretionary budgets of usually authorities at the local level. And secondly, that implementing participatory budgeting can be a straightforward and simple process or a complicated and convoluted one, meaning that in some cases what you get is a city council, for example, decides that 5% of its discretionary budget is going to be spent by citizens, and they put out a list of, let's say, 10 candidate projects, and people are expected to vote for one of them, which one do they want to be implemented. In other instances, cities have engaged in a far more involved and complicated process whereby citizens meet at the neighborhood level, and they sort of discuss priorities for the local area, which are then formulated into specific proposals for projects to be implemented before reaching the decision-making phase. So it can be simple, or it's a very flexible policy. Now, I'm here to essentially present you with a brief overview of the research results from this project. So I'll move to that point. And the three major questions that we were asking for this aspect is, first of all, how is participatory budgeting represented in the media? Secondly, how do citizens feel about participatory budgeting? Are they aware of it? Would they take part if they had the opportunity, and so on? And finally, we wanted to try participatory budgeting in practice in the 7 countries involved in the project. So just moving very fast to the first part of it, representation in the media. This involved first analysis of texts, and we analyzed both online media articles and tweets that contained the term participatory budgeting in 9 different languages. What did we find? We find a general upward trend of articles, of both articles and tweets containing the word participatory budgeting since 2014. And I'm saying there is an increase in the number of articles containing the word, but that should not be taken to imply that there is a general interest on the part of the media concerning participatory budgeting. At the end of the day, let's say 1,000 articles published in a single month on participatory budgeting across 9 languages is not a lot. So it's not the case that the media is paying a lot of attention to participatory budgeting. And even in cases where it does happen, then participatory budgeting is something that is treated superficially, meaning, for example, it is mentioned in passing. Politician X promised to renovate a building Y, implement participatory budgeting, and fix the schools. So a very superficial treatment and very undifferentiated as a panacea. So there isn't a lot of high quality discourse concerning what participatory budgeting is, what its potential benefits are, and so on. On a positive note, at least it's represented overwhelmingly positively. So I would say that there isn't a lot of interest on the part of the media wanting to figure out why that is. We additionally conducted a number of in-depth interviews with a small number of journalists in each country, about 15 journalists who are dealing with local and regional topics. And while they agreed that there is an issue with citizen participation, declining institutional trust, voter rates dropping, and so on and so forth, they understood that this is a problem, and they agreed that PB, participatory budgeting, is indeed a way to mobilize citizens and sort of involve them in decision making. They tended to say that it's a useful idea in theory, but not in practice. And they most often cited the lack of political will to implement in the local area, and also the absence of participatory culture among the citizens, meaning that these journalists did not believe that citizens actually would take part in such a scheme, even if it was available to them. Now, wanting to check that, we conducted a survey that was largish, so about 3,000 respondents from 10 European countries. And the 3 main questions I'll be dealing with here are were respondents aware of participatory budgeting, what it is? Had they ever taken part in participatory budgeting? And would they take part if in the future it was implemented in their city or area? And this is the major result, each bar representing a different behavior, awareness, past participation, and future intent. The light bar represents the percentage of people who said yes. So what's the finding? Generally low awareness of participatory budgeting. except in specific cases, notably Poland, France, and Spain, where PB is institutionalized to one degree or another. In Poland, is constitutionally mandated for cities over a certain size. Participation rate was even lower, under 10%, across all cases. But again, on a positive note, at least there was some interest to participate. About half the sample responded that yes, they would take part, even though the only thing they really knew about participatory budgeting was a brief paragraph explaining what it is. As you would expect, there are significant differences between the levels of different countries when it comes to awareness and past participation, but at least future intent roughly hovered around the 50% level for all countries.
Thank you, Vasilis, for your presentation. I just want to remind the audience that you can submit questions through Slido. You can scan the QR code that you see on the screen, or you put the code hashtag participatory budgeting. Well, since we are many panelists, I just ask each of you to be very concise in your replies. I was thinking to break the ice with a very general question, but with your introduction, you already, I think, introduced your job, yourself, and your role in participatory democracy and participatory budgeting. So I just want to start with Gaetan and Edward. Maybe Gaetan can tell us more about the new Commission platform, and afterward, Edward can tell us more about projects related to the budgeting matters that he was mentioning before. So please, Gaetan, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, Eleonora. I think that indeed, thank you for giving me the chance to say a bit more about the project that the Commission is developing, has been developing in the past year, in fact, as a follow-up to the Conference on the Future of Europe. But perhaps I think I also had a very small time before to speak about the subject. So I just want to explain, come back a little bit to why we are doing this, of course, because we are also in an important electoral year, right? So I think we should also recall that the mother, if you want, of citizen participation remains the election. And when we talk about participatory democracy, we are not opposing it, of course, to representative democracy, and it's important to recall it. But we have a starting point which says that on the one hand, our democracies are very much challenged. Some of the speakers have already mentioned the problem of trust, of distance with the citizens, and the increasing polarization. Second, societies are changing simply, and we still need to innovate and think of our democracy to make sure it's resilient and fit for the future. So it means what we refer to by participatory democracy is ways to associate citizens also in between elections, so that they are active citizens not only in the ballot box, but also at other moments. And increasingly, I mean, it's been a long time, and since these type of participatory methods have been used at local level, at regional level, and increasingly so at national level. But I'm very happy now that it's taking a bigger dimension at pan-European level as well. So, of course, the Conference on the Future of Europe was really an unprecedented exercise, in fact, of participatory democracy and also of deliberative democracy. And this is another word that I would like to bring to the table, because we often now associate these two, because what we desperately need in our democracy are these spaces for the citizens to be able to deliberate together, and to do that in a space that is safe and in a space that is as diverse as possible. And this is why increasingly we see the emergence of these citizens' assemblies, citizens' panels, where people are actually randomly selected. We create a diverse group and create the condition of a deliberation for a long term, leading to policy recommendations. So this is exactly what we have been doing during the Conference on the Future of Europe with 4 European citizens panels. And after the Conference on the Future of Europe, the President von der Leyen announced that this would remain a regular feature of our democratic life. So this is what we've been busy doing in 23 and still now in 24, developing European citizens panels that we embed in the policymaking process of the Commission. So at the moment of drafting, preparing the policy initiative, we associate a group of citizens, and we are launching 2 new ones now, and one actually starting this weekend on energy efficiency. And we are very excited that it becomes a regular feature, that it's really embedded in the process. But of course, we would like to offer the chance to participate in this kind of citizens panels in all citizens of the EU, but we know it's practically very difficult. So we have also developed, and this was also a call from the Conference of the Future of Europe, a citizens engagement platform. So the call from the Conference on the Future of Europe was to have a place, a kind of a one-stop shop, where people would find the information on how they can influence policymaking. So the first step, the work that we have done since the conference, is to have a new Have Your Say portal. So that puts together the 3 main gateways that citizens have to participate in EU policymaking. So one is the public consultation that already exists on legislation, EU legislation, on policy initiative of the Commission. The other one is the European Citizen Initiative that you already know as well, that has been existing for a while. And we have created a third space, which has been very much inspired by the digital platform of the conference. So I'm happy to tell Mr. Scholz that we are now launching this and keeping this platform alive. And the idea is really to create a space for the citizens to bring ideas to the table, but also to exchange between each other, exactly like during the conference, thanks to automatic translation in 24 languages. So, and the idea, of course, is then to connect the debate on this platform to a participatory format, in this case, the European Citizens Panel on Energy Efficiency, and to create a dialogue between this wider public debate and the panel, so that they can feed each other, and at the end also the panel online can feed in the policy initiative of the Commission. So it's a very exciting week, as I was saying at the beginning, perfect to come and exchange with you, because we have this moment where we are launching a panel for the first time, being able to use this platform to amplify, in fact, the participation of citizens. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gaetan. I would like to ask we go to Edward, actually. So I was actually asking him to just go a bit in depth about what he was saying about the project on budgeting matters. Please, Edward, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, I will not speak so much about democratic participation in general, because my colleague Gaetan already gave you the headlines. But I would like to dig a bit deeper into the so-called participatory budgeting, right? Because I think we all recognize the potential of participatory budgeting to empower communities and bring citizens and other stakeholders closer to public decisions. But I think we should distinguish 2 questions, maybe, to focus the debate. One thing is the use of participatory budgeting in the Union, which may take place at different levels, notably local or municipal initiatives, whereby citizens, for instance, propose and vote for initiatives to be implemented through their local budgets. And another question is participatory budgeting at the EU level. That is the possibility to apply such a system in relation to the EU budget. And I believe that Mrs. Calistru also referred to this, question. We need to distinguish the 2 dimensions. So I'll refer to the latter one, the possibility to apply such system in relation to the EU budget. So EU policies, I think we have to recall, are decided through representative democracy, in the sense that decisions are taken by the Council, member states whose representatives have been democratically elected, and by the European Parliament, also democratically elected, so the co-legislators. And more specifically, the so-called MFF, the Multi-Annual Financial Framework, which in essence is the EU budget, is adopted by the Council after the Parliament has given its consent, and the relevant sectoral legislation on the specific programs, such as programs of the EU budget, such as Cohesion, Horizon, Digital Europe program, etc., they are agreed under what we call the ordinary legislative procedure, which means Parliament and Council agreeing on an equal footing. And this existing legal framework for the adoption of the EU budget, or any other EU piece of legislation for that matter, it stems from the treaties. Having said this, the engagement of citizens and businesses and stakeholders is a very important part of that process, of the EU decision-making process, and the work of the Commission in particular. And in fact, stakeholders are already heavily involved in the design of the EU budget. And I would like to give you a few examples. So first of all, we have the open public consultations carried out before the Commission puts forward the relevant legislative proposals that then will be agreed by Parliament and Council. This is in accordance with the better regulation rules, and those involve citizens, companies, beneficiaries of EU funding, member states, etc. And those consultations help identify the policy challenges and how to address it. And for instance, this is what happened in 2018, when we launched a series of consultations covering all the major spending areas to gather views how to make the most of every euro of the EU budget to prepare for the current MFF, so for the 2021 to 2027 multi-annual financial framework. But in addition to this, to the stakeholder consultations before we table a proposal, there are other ways for stakeholders to participate in the design of the EU spending once the MFF and the programs have already been agreed on. For instance, we have cohesion programs, and that is the ERDF, Cohesion Fund, Just Transition Fund, ESF+, which account for 1/3 of the EU budget. So those cohesion programs are implemented through the partnership principle, which means that each program is developed through a collective process involving authorities at European, national, regional, and local level, but also social partners, organizations from civil society, etc. And this approach is to ensure that those actions, the actions which are funded through cohesion, are adapted to the local and the regional needs and priorities. And for instance, as part of the implementation of such partnership principle for cohesion, we promote that managing authorities set up citizen participation processes. This is done by my colleagues in DG Regio. And there was a first pilot in 2021 promoted by the Commission and the OECD to explore how specific managing authorities across Europe in different member states could set up those initiatives. And those projects took place in Spain, Italy, Belgium, and a few others. And for instance, in Cantabria, which is a region of Spain, they set up a citizens' jury to issue recommendations on how to take advantage of cohesion funds, for instance, in this case, to advance on the green transition. And since then, these technical support to managing authorities has been continued for other regions and for other member states. So this is concerning cohesion funds, which represent 1/3 of the EU budget. I have to say that this partnership principle is also an important element for the preparation of the Common Agricultural Policy strategic plans, which are used to implement the CAP funds. And those represent another 1/3 of the budget. And it is also possible for citizens to express their views on the design of the work programs for directly managed programs. This is what I was referring to in my introductory remarks. So these programs of the EU budget are managed by the Commission. For instance, we have Horizon Europe that you know very well, the European Defence Fund, Digital Europe, EU for Health, Innovation Fund. There's a lot of them. And they more or less constitute another 1/3 of the EU budget. And every year we adopt a work program that defines the calls for proposals that will be launched by the Commission to select projects, basically, that will receive funds. And for instance, there was a stakeholder consultation in 2023 for the program EU for Health, another one for the future of research and innovation programs, etc., etc. So I think all those elements we need to take into account. And also maybe a final remark from my side, which is to highlight the democratic accountability dimension of the EU budget, which is also sometimes overlooked because it's quite a technical process. But this stems from the fact that the Commission is scrutinized by the Parliament regarding the implementation of the EU budget. And this scrutiny by the Parliament is called discharge procedure, and it serves to ensure compliance with the legal frameworks and the principle of sound financial management. So we need to respond before the Parliament for that. But in any case, happy to answer questions and to continue to discuss with colleagues on this very interesting topic.
Thank you so much. I want just to pass to Helmut because he was talking about the Conference on Future of Europe. So from your point of view, which are the lessons learned and best practices and the bad practices that were happening during the Conference on the Future of Europe?
Huge question. What is the perspective? And I think all the contributions already heard in this debate is showing that the different ideas presented during the conference at various levels, in the citizens' panels, in the plenary, etc., is telling us that we have to understand that the democratic basement of the European integration process, or today and also in future, needs a transparent, proceduring of all decision making at EU level. And citizens then can understand that there are limits in the budget, budgeting for the one or the other program, etc. As it was already mentioned now, the Horizon program, unfortunately, the Council, despite the Parliament's position, has decreased the money for this budget line, and that will be, of course, have an influence on which projects will be continued. So I think this example of participatory budgeting maybe is even one crucial issue, because then citizens can also learn how we are dealing with the money we have, and that is our taxpayers' money so far. Maybe some additional own resources, but mainly taxpayers' money, and for which programs, for which policy fields, for which developments of the integration it is used for by the co-legislators, but of course also under the public consultation. And therefore I would say one of the lessons of the Conference on the Future of Europe is that we should start at a very early stage to include citizens in the development of the decision making, explaining what is foreseen, what we have to deal with in certain ways. I give you a concrete example from the municipal level, which I think is very important, because there is also the lack to link a referendum on a certain project with the budgeting at the municipal level. In Germany, in my constituency, there is now the plan of the Tesla Gigafactory in Brandenburg, to enlarge the production lines. There was already a huge debate about the deforestation in the area when the first stage of the construction of the Tesla Gigafactory has happened. Just now there are plans to enlarge this, another 100 hectares of deforestation. And the city hall has organized a referendum by the citizens, and the citizens have said no. So the question will be, will this result, it is not binding, have an influencing how the citizens are understanding what does it mean for the further budgeting at this municipal level, because the foreseen tax money from the enlarged gigafactory will not be able to raise. So in a certain way, they have also decided what is more important, the economic development linked to social and ecological aspects. Sorry. In this direction, we should be very clear that this participatory budgeting means to include citizens in the project's development. And I give you a second example, which I think is very important for the moment. We are discussing the question of the enlargement of the European Union. Reform and enlargement of the EU. It must be a parallel process, because without reform, enlargement will not be able. Enlargement will not be able without reforming. What does it mean for the cohesion policy, for the budgeting, for the money foreseen? What does it mean for programs which, under the current circumstances, are dealt with the European Union as long as we know this project? With the next enlargement, there will be automatic, if we go into the procedural issues, change of Romania, Bulgaria, other countries into net payer countries, because the accession countries will need a lot of money, because in the average they are much lower under the cohesion understanding. So do we already now discussing with the citizens what does it mean for the future spending of money for one or the other project? And I think this is about the democratic functioning of the European Union. And we in the Parliament, we are going into this direction to see the enlargement not only as a geo-economic, geopolitical issue, but an issue which will deeply change the European Union as it exists today. So this is, of course, also linked to the question we are discussing today. And that would be because the conference on the future of Europe has been spoken positively about the enlargement. The citizens have said, yes, there is a right of citizens of these countries to become members of the European Union. So how we are dealing in this way responsibly to the dimension. And I would say that is an example showing that the interlinkages between between the municipal or regional level and the EU decision making has a deeply interlinked connectivity. And I would say this we should make transparent. Therefore, I really welcome, Gaetan, that the digital platform is coming. We should really use this in a way to include at the early stage of the discussion the citizens in the issues, and so to collect ideas. And thirdly, I want not to be too lengthy. It is a question about the relationship between participatory democracy and representative democracy. You know that the representatives, the co-legislators, democratic institutions, the parliament and the council will insist on their right to make the final decision. How far this decision making is influenced by the positions, by the recommendations, by the abilities of citizens to come into this decision-making process is a decisive one. And I would say we have to discuss further how we are interlinking representative and participatory democracy, because I agree very much with all the other speakers that today, 2024, we are in a different stage compared to the Lisbon Treaty, compared to 5 years ago even. The crises are multiple, the challenges are multiple, and therefore I really want to stress that in the parliament there is a deep debate about the issues, but very different positions. So also the representatives have no unified approach to it, and we should keep the debate on this issue and the further debate how we can also use the participatory budgeting as a tool which is showing in which way we have to develop democratic the democratic understanding of the integration process. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Helmut. Let me change a little bit the focus now. I want to focus more on the citizens' dimension of the participation. And I want to ask a question to both Karol and Andras. In your experience, what is the best way to make participatory budgeting process inclusive and to convince the citizens to take part of it? Because, of course, they are very tiring process, they are very long process, and sometimes the citizens, as you all said, are very reluctant to take part in democratic processes. So please, Karol, can you give your opinion on that?
Yes, thanks very much, Eleonora. Well, quite clearly, what we're talking about here in terms of deliberative processes, focusing on individual citizens and drawing them into the process is time-consuming. It's resource-intensive as well. So, for municipalities, for regions, for provinces, they understand that, but they all understand quite clearly the need and importance of what we can get out of this this process and how it can draw in a better buy-in, of course, from citizens, in terms of the decisions that are taken on their behalf, in places where they live, and how they can affect change. So I think it's difficult to say specifically whether there isn't a unified approach. It will depend on the city, the village, the region, but I think that what we can more speak about are the tools or the approaches underlying that. So we've already highlighted those so far. An approach has to be open and it has to be transparent. There are many examples of that are taking place now across Europe. I can mention certain number of examples. In France, in Poitiers, where they are looking at how you take decisions on basic issues of how to reduce incivilities in public spaces, asking citizens for their ideas on this. So this is quite clearly, it's a deliberative process. It's not participatory budgeting, but it's about asking citizens about their places. If they want cleaner spaces that are more inviting, how can we do that? Going out to the citizens, organising panels, drawing them in and making sure that that those processes are inclusive. There's no point in going out to your citizens and just getting the involvement of the usual suspects. It takes time and effort to have all citizens of an area involved. That means taking the time to, if you have citizens from different backgrounds, from different groups, how do you reach out? How do you get hold of those citizens? Intergenerational issues, citizens, if you want to have not just citizens who are, for example, pensioners, but who are workers, who are the disabled, who are working parents, what do you do to draw those, all of those voices in, how to elevate those voices and make sure that you get across the board involvement. You might need to think about things such as interpretation if you want to have different voices and to recognise different elements that we can bring to the table, and that all of those can be counted, as it were. Going back to the point that was already said, when we bring together all of these different ideas about what we want to bring about, whether it to have cleaner spaces, or whether we take a decision on if we want to have a youth centre, or whether we want to have an art museum, a place in Tartu in eastern Estonia. they take these decisions. They have a participatory budgeting process every year, starting in April, going through to October. It's very clear. They go out to their citizens. Citizens know exactly when. They've been doing this now for about 10 years. They go out to citizens. People know exactly when the process will start. 200,000 euros, which is set aside for 2 projects each year. Citizens are invited to bring forward their ideas. They are then discussed, they are voted on, and there is an open process. And then the ideas, there are a mixed panel that decides upon that. So a mixed panel drawn from the area collectively to decide on that, and that's voted on, and it's a very open and transparent process. And it is also explained to citizens the decisions that were taken, why certain projects were not accepted. Again, all about being open, being transparent, and helping citizens to understand as well. Andras has already mentioned that with regards to the project in Cluj, but it's about helping citizens to understand that there aren't endless pots of money available. So we have to make choices. How are those choices made? Why do we make those choices? Citizens, are very smart. They understand that we have to make choices. So, those are all parts of democracy, different elements to that. But the way that you take that forward will depend on the area, will depend on the groups that you're addressing, will depend on the needs that you are addressing as well. Within the area, different areas have different needs and different interests. And it's important that a municipality, a town understands that and thinks about how they can revive their democracies as well, which is all part of the building process and the buy-in process, which I think the EU can learn from quite clearly, that we need to think about at those micro steps. What can we then learn at a macro level to perhaps introduce some of those ideas better into the whole policy making process and the decisions that we take at the EU level to re-establish our trust with citizens, that their voice counts.
Perfect, Carol. Thank you so much. Now, Andras, I would like to have your opinion on the same issue.
First of all, I would second several things Carol mentioned. I completely agree with them. What additionally I would maybe highlight is they might be very not citizen engagement related things, but which I believe are essential for every project, especially coming from public authorities. First, packaging. Don't call it participatory budgeting if you have a better name for it. It is a participatory budgeting as a process, but you don't necessarily need to call it like that. Maybe some people get scared of being called participatory budgeting. Maybe they consider themselves not the most responsible people in deciding in budgets because their own experience is that their financial health is not good enough, so they might not be willing to get engaged in something as a financial decision. But if you call it in a different way, it could work. Several cities are doing this. I know that Budapest, for example, now did it, different packaging, and there was more engagement. Also in our case with Come On Cluj, this is why we call it Come On Cluj. It's a call to action towards young people. If we would say participatory budgeting for youth, they might become scared of it, actually. The second, I think, which is really essential, is about the very simple dynamics between public authorities and citizens, meaning whatever question I put, that kind of answer I will get. So we need to work a lot in the background on how to design the process. When it becomes public and when we expect the engagement of citizens, the question for which we are engaging them needs to be very simple, and the solution which they can answer, they can give needs to be very simple. Like, what is the action? Maybe it's a vote, maybe it's a ranking, maybe it's a kind of other kind of prioritizing, but they need to understand what is they are asked for. We need to understand that people, although there is a difference obviously between various people and various persons, there is a limit in time which they can or are willing to invest in this. So they want to invest their time in this, but we cannot expect them to invest days or weeks. So it needs to be a very simple interaction, and we need to understand what is the user experience from this side. And maybe we can import a lot of approaches from the private sector where the user experience is absolutely vital and they are building products on this. In this case, the product in bracket is the participatory budgeting. Another is what I would highlight is the accountability. And my experience with just following some of the cities who launched participatory budgeting, no matter what type of PB was, but it was a kind of PB, was that the first edition was really wow, because people said, well, finally the city hall opens up and we can take part in this decision. But when they are doing for the 4th or the 5th year, the process slows down. There is a huge problem, or let's say challenge, of cities on being able to deliver on the decisions. So me as a person, I took part in it. Maybe I proposed an idea, maybe it was voted, then the municipality needs to actually implement it. It takes time because of public procurement, different kinds of things. But the city hall needs to report on what came out of it, or any institution who is doing the PB. Because if not, me as a citizen, I will put myself the question in 3 years, okay, but I have voted for something 3 years before, and then the solution is still not implemented. So why did I vote then? So how can I hold you as an owner of the budget accountable for my decision on which you need to follow up? So I think these are really very relevant questions, and anybody who designs such a process needs to really think about what is the level of engagement. Is the decision or the level of engagement of citizens mandatory for the institution who proposed the whole process? So it is the highest level of empowerment, or maybe it was just a consultative version. But these things need to be really well designed, and then later on they need to be followed up. And I think that in a lot of cases the PBs are producing positive impact, but again they are not communicated well after that. I just know some examples in Cluj where I think PB actually produced really good results. Like, let me give you an example, the school bus system. So Cluj didn't have a school bus system in 2017, and then citizens prioritized this as one of the most important things to be implemented. The city hall procured the specific buses which can fit into smaller streets and stuff like that, and then the network is now working, and it was extended. But somehow I don't know if citizens realize that this investment, which took 4 or 5 years until it was perfected, was actually sourced or was originated in a citizen's decision. It is just the municipality didn't communicate on this later on. Because this is where I would come back to Carol, is that building up trust in such a mechanism takes time. So yes, initially there is this positive, there is this optimism for the process. But then keeping up this optimism and keeping up this trust, it needs nurturing, it needs time. And in a lot of cases, I also tend to see that municipalities are maybe not having the necessary skills for doing this. And this is where, for example, civil society or various stakeholders can come in with their own expertise, saying that, okay, maybe the facilitation process or the direct engagement with people shouldn't be done by municipal employees, but it can be done by some civil society actors who are really good in this. And then you can create some cross-sectorial partnerships which can take this further. Finally, really just one final remark. I think what is being decided on is essential. So we had this experience in Cluj, also with our own youth-related processes, that participatory budgeting becomes a popularity contest, and it shouldn't. So it should be something where really citizens detach themselves from their own personal interest maybe, and they are able to compare some proposals or some priorities and to decide together. For example, I wouldn't see a European level PB happening about questions which are more relevant for one region of Europe than for the other region, because then it will become a little bit, and sorry for the parallel, like Eurovision. It's like I'm voting for my friend or my neighboring country. I cannot vote for myself, obviously, but it becomes a popularity contest. So we need to be aware about how we can detach people a little bit from their own personal interest and really urge them to really consider the options, and then to really decide about, okay, this is more important than the other one, and then being aware of the final decision which comes up collectively.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your contribution. Now I want to go to Elena, and I want still to keep focus on the citizens, but I want to differentiate the different level of political participation. So there is a strong engagement of citizens' participation, I think, in terms of practices at local level. The more the level is high, so we arrive at regional, national, and EU level, the harder, I think, from my point of view, is to involve citizens in legislation. So Elena, I want to ask you, what is the most effective way to involve EU citizens in EU politics and EU legislation from your point of view?
Here I would agree with Andras. There is an entire role to be played by organized civil society, and by organized civil society, I'm not only referring to NGOs, but I'm also taking into account the trade unions or the business associations, which do have a role to play. And they should be seen as facilitators, especially for high levels of in the policy-making process, because they can act both in terms of ensuring that it's not a popularity contest only, but also they can make sure that the proposals are grounded in a larger policy framework. To this end, I think that also at European level, institutions like the ESC, that I have recently joined, by the way, so I'm not very well aware of the entire historical process, but I see that there is an openness towards youth organizations, towards grassroots civil society organizations. But such institutions can act as a facilitator or as a curator of some of these processes. At the same time, I would say that it's a paradox to a certain level when we are seeing at what interests citizens. And I think that a good parallel here is related to what is happening with the agenda, the public agenda, and with the media. When you go at the grassroots level, for example, you see more people that are aware of who is the main contestant in the US elections, for example, in the primaries, which is very, very remote, rather than who is the contestant in their own city. It's a paradox because in theory, the local politics and the local policies should be closer to the citizens. But at the same time, the advent of social media, the internet, and so on and so forth made the interests of citizens much broader. And I think that the EU decision makers should tap into this trend and should be leading a conversation towards what do we want from Europe, also from this perspective. At the same time, I would agree with what was mentioned at the very beginning of our conversations with regards to the cohesion policy. I think the cohesion policy, besides being and representing a large chunk of the EU budget, is also a laboratory of testing various participatory mechanisms. And I think that we have there many well-established frameworks in which we can also add other layers of consultation. Moreover, I think that besides having all this potential from the already existing instruments, I believe that there is some, let's say, soul searching we have to do as organized civil society, as organized trade unions and employers organizations as well, because I believe that there is, to a certain extent, this tendency towards believing that it is almost impossible not to get into the populist realm with these discussions, because it is about money, and because, yes, it does tend to become a competition between the most sparkling projects you can see. So here, there is, I believe, a good moment right now at EU level, not only because we have the elections and we will have a new round of elected officials, a new commission, but also because indeed we are, and this will sound like a cliche, but it's a cliche because it's true. But we are at the crossroads, and I think that with the entire discussion about enlargement, yes, we need to discuss about how we reform the EU in order to make it more representative and in order to make it more fit for the demands of the citizens. But also there is an entire discussion about how the new multi-annual financial framework would look like. So while it seems like a technical conversation to be held with, I don't know, large groups of citizens, I believe we can design a multi-layer framework in which organized civil society can go in deeper at the grassroots level and try to involve as many citizens as possible in a structured and open process. Because let's not forget, and I think that we should underline this as much as possible, when we are talking about participatory budgeting, yes, we're only talking about one of the potential tools. If we want real empowerment, if we want citizens that feel that they have an ownership over the EU policies, then we have to have several elements. We need to have transparency, we need to have the participation pillar, but we also need to have oversight possibilities. So we need to empower also bodies like the European Parliament or the national parliaments or the regional and local councils in making sure that what resulted from these consultations with citizens are then implemented and put forward as real actions from the institutions. It sounds like a complicated process, and it is, because if it would have been that simple, we wouldn't have this conversation right now. But at the end of the day, I don't think we have any other options other than going and dissecting whatever instruments have worked at local, regional, or European level, and see how to make sure that those are scaled then also at EU level.
Thank you so much for your intervention. I want just to go back to Vasilis about what he said on the culture of participatory democracy. What do you mean by that? And would you like to ask something else beyond your presentation? Please, go ahead.
I was making a note on the absence of participatory culture among the citizenry in various countries in Europe. All these participatory schemes are not common in some places, like Greece, like Cyprus, whereas in other cases they are, the UK, the Netherlands, and so on. And in the case of the former, when it's an unusual process that the population is unfamiliar with, there is some suspicion towards it. Is it possible? Will it actually have any impact? Will my participation actually matter for any decisions made? So let me second the comments made by Ms. Thomas and Mr. Farkas, that any kind of participatory scheme of this sort, any kind of organizing authority needs to, in order to ensure some success, it needs to keep in mind the resources required to run the process, to commit to actually providing these resources and the technical know-how. It needs to invest the process with a sense of efficacy, meaning to commit to implementing decisions made, not simply treat them as a consultation. To the extent that that's possible, it needs to commit to trying to involve as many people as possible, not just the usual suspects, well-educated, older, higher incomes, and so on. And it also needs to communicate the process better and the results. Otherwise, citizens tend not to take these things as seriously as they should. That's it.
Thank you so much for your intervention. I just want to go back on Slido, which again, if you want to submit a question, you can scan the QR code, or you can put the code #participatory budgeting. So I asked the question to Carol Thomas by Juliette Burton. In practice, how can the EU assess the progress and impacts of decisions made by citizens taking part in the participatory budgeting? Please, Carol, go ahead.
Could you repeat the question?
Absolutely.
Can you repeat?
So the question is, in practice, how can the EU assess the progress and impacts of decisions made by citizens taking part in the participatory budgeting?
Okay, all right. So this would then be about the Commission evaluating or assessing decisions that have been taken at the local, the municipal level. I'm reading it in that way because quite clearly the whole area of participatory budgeting, participatory processes, democracy has been underway for many years already, and quite clearly, I know that Vasilis has stressed the fact that there are some areas of Europe where it is still very unknown, and that is a pity that is the case, because quite clearly all parts of Europe need to have that opportunity to see how this can really make a difference and how it can bring change. And what I think that what the European institutions, or the Commission in particular, could probably do with is going and looking at specific examples across Europe where it has taken place in different types of areas. I mean, we've already mentioned certain countries where it is quite it is a process. It is quite well understood and operational. Whether that be in France, there are in the UK. I've already mentioned Estonia as well, in Germany. But often the idea is about as we move forward, and where I think the Commission could look at assessing the outcomes of those, is really after a period of time, how regularly are our citizens continuing to engage with the process? What are the elements, the factors that determines that citizens find the process useful, that they actually do engage with it, that they agree or feel that the outcomes, whether they maybe are outcomes that they didn't necessarily, if we're talking specifically about let's look at the urban area. In Estonia, in Tartu, they have citizens' assemblies which look at how to evolve and have impacts on the urban area. For example, the creation of new cycle lanes, cycle paths. That's a decision that is taken on the basis of a citizens' assembly that is being run. The local authority, Tartu City Council, have to, as I say, the process will be run over a specific period of time. Citizen will be drawn in. The City Council will think about all of the elements that they need to do. They will know their populations. They will understand them. What needs to be in place to draw in those citizens? What time, the timing of organising those consultations, those dialogues. What do they need to do to make it available to working parents, and not just those who are available perhaps during the daytime. What is how do they draw in parts of the community that would like maybe to have great, access to be able to use those cycle paths, but for whatever reason, find it difficult to do that. So you have to think about all of the different stages of what is it that you want to achieve at the end of the day, how to draw in all of those, the different groups and the elements who need to take part in that, drawing upon the budget that, what budget you have available for that. And I would certainly say I'm glad to hear that, once again, that the Commission are going forward with this supporting participatory and deliberative processes. But it would be probably quite helpful, I think, if the Commissioner in some way, I know that they're looking at the skills that are needed for the skills that are needed, for example, by local and municipal councils, but whether the Commission in some way could make some budgetary facility available to help spread that knowledge more widely about what's happening, on the ground. We're doing that within CMR with our platform, with our members, sharing that information. But perhaps the Commission as a multiplier could maybe look to see, what works well, what works less well, and to explore the reasons for that. And that could help take us forward with these processes and help those countries who are maybe feeling suspicious about it to learn and to see and to exchange on how they can maybe take on some of those ways of working at the local level to incorporate those within their own systems. So that would be a call to, particularly the Commission to maybe think about that on top of what you're already doing, I know, and supporting these processes.
Thank you so much. I just want to pass to Gaëtan, that has to leave. And just if you want to share with us a final remark, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you for the last call to the Commission. I wanted to, emphasize again this idea of culture change that indeed we need. I think to be complete in the panorama I was making of the efforts that have been made since the conference, The Future of Europe, and during the conference, of course, I should mention also that in the Defense of Democracy package, which you may have seen, there is actually a recommendation to the member state on both on civic participation, so both with the angle of organized civil society and with the angle of participatory democracy and direct citizens participation. You will see that there, this is a document that can be useful also to trigger change and culture change at member state or regional level. And one message, what is important in the culture change for me, and I think it was also touched on by other speakers, it's really this idea that there is space for everyone in this democracy, that we are not opposing participatory democracy with representative democracy, but we are not also opposing the direct citizen participation to a organized civil society. This would be, there's a space for civil dialogue, there is a space for citizens' participation. I agree that we should probably reflect now on creating better synergies between the processes that are being developed. But I think there is really a space for everyone, and that our democracies desperately need it, that we look at how it's changing, at how it's evolving. And I think just the way citizens nowadays get their information, the way the social media bubbles, all these phenomena, we cannot ignore them. We have to, as I was saying at the beginning, build a democracy that is fit for the future, and there some innovation and trigger some new tools. This does not mean that what we were doing before should be abandoned, but it's an addition. It's to make our democracy stronger overall. And I wanted to say a last word also on transparency. I also heard it, I think, from Helmut Scholz. I think it's a key word as well, because we were saying, yes, of course, for the citizens' participation needs to be meaningful, both for the policymakers. It has to see that it's actually useful, and we are also creating a culture change also inside the Commission to convince our colleagues that this is useful for the quality of their policy making. But it needs to be meaningful also for the citizens. And we will never convince about citizens' participation and make sure that citizen participation has the effect of raising trust and the sense of belonging and working together if we don't also are not transparent about what we do with the recommendations. And indeed, what we are really trying to embed in the policy making process is not only the participatory format or process in itself, but a long process of first there is a participation, there is an input, and then what do we do with it? So we will use a platform for that also to show that there is a follow-up process, and most importantly, there is a feedback to citizens on this follow-up, because I've seen so many participatory processes where there is a follow-up, but the citizens are not aware of it. And this is really the transparency about what we are going to do with the recommendation is key. In that transparency, we also need to remind that because we are in a representative democracy, many times the public authority keeps the last word. But we need also to explain why we took some of the recommendations on board, why some perhaps could not be taken on board. And this is a dialogue with citizens that will lead step by step to a more mature democracy, also where citizens can understand some of the constraints, but we are also accountable and transparent about this participatory process that we put in place. And I think I will stop here. Thank you very much for inviting me here. I'm very sorry I have to leave, but initially it was foreseen to be finished at 11 and I had another important meeting. Thank you very much.
Absolutely no problem, Gaetan. Thank you for being with us. I want just to pass to a new question on Slido, actually, that is in line with our debate on the different level of involvement of citizens in the participatory democracy processes. So here, Christopher Williams is asking to everyone, but I will pick up someone to reply. Involvement of citizens in participatory budgeting, it should be only local issue, or it should be EU-wide matters? And he is mentioning defense spending, considering Trump could be the next president of the US, but also, for example, the cost of the enlargement. And I want also to mention that yesterday Ursula von der Leyen mentioned that citizens want more money to spend more money on defense. So I think it's a pressuring matter to see how citizens want to spend money at the EU level. So maybe I can start with Eduard, and then we can move to Helmut to have more the institutional side for our reply.
Yes, thank you. Indeed, very good question. So I tried to explain in my previous intervention what are the ways in which citizens and stakeholders can participate in the EU decision-making process, and they can also influence EU spending, and that related to cohesion, but also agricultural policy, and also directly managed programs, where we have in particular the European Defence Fund. But I think the question is, the way I read it at least, is more forward-looking, right? And this links to the point made by Mr. Scholz and by Mrs. Calistru, if I'm not mistaken, apologies, if I'm not mistaken, that we should start thinking about the future, about the next MFF. We should turn to the upcoming years, and it's inevitable. I mean, citizens will be an essential part of this discussion, and it's more important than ever to have an open debate about how we want to organize the next MFF. Because I mean, you might have the feeling that this MFF will continue until 2027 and that this is far away, but in fact it's not so far away. It's a long process, the one to adopt the MFF legislative package, because it involves the proposals to work and to adopt the proposals within the Commission, and then also the negotiations with Parliament and with the Council. So in fact, we should start the process, and we're starting the process now. We just adopted the midterm revision of this current MFF a couple of weeks ago, or at least there was a political agreement on that, and now we can close that chapter and start thinking about the future. And basically, we'll need to factor in the questions on defense, the geopolitical context. We'll need to factor in enlargement. We'll need to see how the EU budget can continue to address all the crises and challenges that we're being faced with, while at the same time continuing to support the green and the digital transition, the social and territorial cohesion, agriculture, etc. And I would also take the opportunity to agree also with Mr. Scholz. I believe when he mentioned, or he pointed out that we should better explain what the EU budget does for citizens. I could not agree more. And this is a way to promote citizen participation in the design of EU spending. And I believe that there's not a lot of awareness what the EU budget is doing, at all levels for citizens, maybe beyond Erasmus and beyond Creative Europe, which is our program to support media industries in Europe. And sometimes you see the logo when you go to the cinema. But beyond that, there's much more. So I would hope that we can count on a higher level of intensity in terms of citizens' engagement, but also other types of stakeholders for the design of the next MFF. I don't have the answers how we should organize the next MFF, because this is indeed a question that we'll have to discuss all together.
Thank you so much. Please, Helmut, would you like to add something on it?
I see that there is a broad understanding, a joint even, I would say, or common understanding that we are agreeing very much on the meaning of this PB challenge, even if Andras Farkas has said we should find a new name for this. But in the understanding that the budget needs the participation of citizens, I would recommend that we, in a certain way, should keep the idea, because that makes a certain transparent understanding what we are calling or what we are inviting for. And so that, and coming back to the question, the original question you raised from Slido, I would say it should not be put against each other. It should be, even at the municipal level, a lot of decisions are linked to the lawmaking in the European Union. And so the laws, the regulations we are adopting have a direct influence of the daily life of the citizens at the ground. So in the member states, and therefore I would say, what is also the challenge to all stakeholders at various levels, to transport in a transparent way how these interlinkages are taken by them to find the answer to the needs, to the concerns, to the requests, to the wishes of people. And therefore, if we are speaking about the money which is needed for the continuation of the support for the Ukrainian people, then we have to explain where is the money coming from. What does it mean? Do we spend the money for the cohesion policy? Do we spend the money for the defense issues, for the arms industries, etc.? Who are the benefiters of if we are increasing the production of arms? Is the money and the taxes these arms industry are paying back maybe into the national or in the European budget, which must be discussed, and then could be also used for other budget lines, etc. So the complexity of the budgeting, I think, is just now on the stake. And you remember the protest of the farmers in front of the European institutions just 2 or 3 weeks ago have demonstrated that they felt alone because there was not really an inclusion of the concerns of the local farmers via the farmer associations, big ones and smaller ones, with a different economic and I would say in a certain way also social reality towards the decision making. And here I think this participatory democracy could become really a tool, including the budgeting issues, for developing democracy. And I want to be frank, in the European Parliament we have probably a majority of members who are saying, no, the budget right is our right. And we are the elected representatives. And the same I would describe to the council from my experience. So finally, they decide according to their national interest. We are more in the situation that we can really find solutions and issues where we are covering the European community interest, and that is already a clash. And as we are not somewhere in the air, but included in a concrete space where we have to find political solutions, the emerging of right populist, right extreme forces in a lot of member states means also they are using the lack of democratic backing of the decisions which are made and why they are made, and in which way citizens should have more abilities to influence this decision-making process. And that is true both at the political level probably, but of course in particular also with the budgeting, with the money, because this is the authorities of the institutions, and the institutions should be open, and they should how to say it, re-educate themselves to understand that what they are doing is directly involving impacting the life of the citizens. And here I think we are on a stake in a very important point of the democratic development of the European Union. We should not underestimate the meaning of this task in the next weeks, months, and probably also the next 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Helmut. We are at the last stage of our debate, which I really find enjoying. So thank you so much for your all contribution. Now I would like to ask each of you a final remark, and I would like to start from Elena. Please, go ahead.
I would finish by saying that I think it's a good sign, the fact that we are all reflecting at this moment on the tools that might bring more participation to the fiscal policies of the European Union. I think we are seeing at least a common understanding with regards to the need to have such mechanisms when it comes to citizens and when it comes to involving them at the EU level. I also believe that as the song goes, it's all about the money, or to stay on European grounds, money must be funny in the rich man's world. It's no longer a question for rich men's right now. I think that this is the advantage we as Europeans have, and I think we should understand the fact that we can no longer keep the decisions related to how the taxpayers' money is spent only at a very technical level. What if there is something we should all understand is that civil society, either organized or at large, should be put at the same table and be made part of the decision-making process when it comes to the budgets.
Thank you so much. Please, Vasilis.
Yes, a final remark. Since there was a bit of a discussion about implementing a scheme like participatory budgeting at the EU level, I feel I should point out the need to understand and take into account when organizing and designing such schemes to keep in mind that the national and local contexts also matter. So people have different expectations from such processes, and of different expectations of what they will look like and what their outcome will be. And I'm not sure that it will be possible to have a pan-European, say, participatory budgeting that works as equally well in all different national contexts. I just
Much, Vasilis. Now, please, Andras.
I don't know if Demotech covered it, but maybe one way to be able to measure the impact of such processes would be just to set a benchmark for it. I'm thinking of very bluntly a set of indicators, like 15 to 20 indicators. Some of those might be pulled out from the conclusions which Vasilis presented about the project. And this way, maybe it can be a tool through which somebody who does participatory budgeting, no matter at which level, but is able to cross-reference the result, and maybe also it will incentivize coordinators to measure the impact of any kind of PB process at local level. And then if I would imagine this at EU level, if it will be a kind of willful reporting on these indicators, which can be collected, gathered, and analyzed by somebody at a higher level, European level, then maybe one would be able to demonstrate the impact of this tool, basically, and various forms of this tool, because there might be multiple versions of it. But to explain the effect of this tool about the very things were mentioned by several of you, meaning the surgence of extremist views and how this can actually enable meaningful debates. I don't know, make people to think more critically about some of the issues, and having the chance to really understand the context, even if it's about available budgets and resources. So maybe this would be something which we collectively could take forward. I know that we were just with Command Cluj now, we are in the process of defining some indicators of outcome and of impact, which could be measured during the next 3 years, but also after that, because the need is coming also from the fact that we need to understand what effects is this producing, not the outputs of our activities, but actually the outcomes on the beneficiaries and stakeholders, and then the impact which is going beyond our own process. So maybe this would be something which could be taken forward, and I'm most certain that this is something where all of us, meaning the public institutions, the European level governance, the European level decision making, the local actors need to be involved, because this is the best way to define them and then to follow up on them.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And now I pass to Carol. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, just a final couple of words. We've basically, said it already, but just to emphasise, as we all know, we're at a watershed moment, for our democracy. Now we know what's ahead of us. We know what the signs are with regards to what to expect from the next EP elections. So we time is not on our side, to that extent. But I did want to say we've flagged up the issue of representative democracy as opposed to or alongside deliberative, democracy processes. And as already been said, it's not an either or. It's crucial that we make space and that we understand that our citizens expect to have the opportunity to influence and to shape in between those critical moments of elections. So whatever can be done now to support and better laws, the improvement for citizens' lives, that citizens can see that the changes that are taking place and that they can basically shape those. We need to take that seriously now, and we need to look at and to see different examples of what works well, and to look to see how we can take those forward, because time is not on our side. And as far as we as local and regional governments are concerned in supporting the improvement of our citizens' lives, all I would say is that we continue to, we talked about the Have Your Say as a tool, of course, to shape policies, EU policies, and it's somewhere that we particularly feel needs to be strengthened in terms of how we can actually influence and shape EU policies that necessarily needs to show it's the benefits, the beneficiaries on the ground. So we will continue to act on that score from our perspective, particularly for the next Commission, to make sure that those tools are working well. So both from the strengthening representative democracy, but making sure that we can take forward and elevate citizens' voices, which are more necessary than ever before, because we can't wait. Basically, now we're in a critical moment, and we need to act. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Please, Helmut, your turn.
Try to be as short as possible. I would say the whole discussion shows we should learning by doing. So we should not hesitate to go further in the direction. But of course, also this participatory democracy is happening in a concrete time frame, in a concrete locations frame. We are discussing the rule of law in the European Union and its member states. So you could even undermine the rule of law of the European Union and have a participatory democracy, participation of citizens in the decision making at the municipal, local, regional or national level. So the question is that we always should really provide guidance also to participants in which way we want to have to achieve a commonly described aim, and by that giving also the citizens understanding how they, in which means they should participate in this decision making. And I think that is also very important. So the transparency, the defense of the rule of law inside the European Union, the rule-based structures is so important, because otherwise we could also have the challenge and the danger that also this budgeting under the discussions with citizens leads to different orientations. So in a certain way, it is also a question about the political coherence, the political understanding why we are integrating ourselves, what is the aim of the European integration, and why we are working together cross-border, etc. And that is linking the participatory democracy from the municipal to the European Union level. And here I would say really learning by doing. Let's continue and to collect the different experiences. And I hope that our discussion today is leading also to a new step in this direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Helmut. Now to Edward, please.
Yes, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to join this debate and to exchange with colleagues on this very interesting topic. I think we'll agree that citizens' engagement is essential at all levels, also at EU level. And this is why we have doubled down on it by creating the new platform that my colleague Gaëlle spoke about, and the citizens panels, in addition to the other initiatives already on the table, such as the Have Your Say portal. And specifically for financial matters, we also have to recognize that the potential of participatory budgeting to empower communities. And that we've seen notably in the implementation of cohesion funds. We've seen that it makes a difference. And very happy that this topic is in the spotlight. And I'm sure it's not the last occasion that we'll have to have an exchange of views on it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Edward. I just take the opportunity to thank you all for this meaningful debate on a topic that unfortunately is not in everyday media, but it actually should be, because how we handle democracy and how we want to see citizens participating and contributing to the public life is a central matter, in particular now that 4 billion people are going to vote this year around the world. Well, this is a very pressure issue. So thank you so much. And I hope to see you all soon, both who listen to us and the panelists in future Euractiv event. Goodbye.